back to the Film Library, a Kanopy podcast. I'm Daniel Thompson. Joining me as always, Alonso Duralde. Alonso, how you doing, sir?
Great. I'm very excited about this episode. This is a subject matter that I have covered and dealt with most of my professional career.
You could say that you wrote the book.
You could, yes. My book, Hollywood Pride, out in May 2024, depending on when you're listening to this.
Shameless plug.
Look, you got to do it sometimes. But I have had the good fortune to really write about queer cinema going back decades now. And I've also, been a programmer at Outfest and other LGBTQ plus film festivals. So I am deeply invested in the history of LGBTQ plus cinema. And I think that going back, as with so many other genres, you can look back and see the history of it, the arc of its progress over the course of cinema history, and so much of the exciting contemporary work that's happening, and it's all here on Kanopy.
Yeah, and due to a lack of accessibility, really, in the mainstream for a lot of these films for a lot of years, unfortunately, they've been missed. These movies have been missed. Been missed by me growing up. I wasn't given a lot of access to LGBTQ plus films here in South Carolina in the 80s and 90s. And so Kanopy, this is what we do each and every week. We find a genre and we get to dive further into that genre thanks to the 30,000 plus titles on Kanopy that you can have at your fingertips with just a library card. Kanopy's giving opportunity for people like me to discover the greatness of these films and to add to my knowledge of what LGBTQ cinema is really all about.
Yeah, I remember, when I first came out and I moved to Dallas, Texas, there was a video store that had a gay and lesbian section that I just worked my way through. But that was because Dallas is a relatively big city with a gayborhood, and not everybody grows up in a place like that. And so you're right. I think for a lot of film lovers, this is really the kind of first chance they've had to have this depth of titles at their fingertips with just a library card, be it at their public or academic library. And, this is a really vast array of film that spans genre, that spans nationality, that spans gender, you name it. There are all kinds of stories being told here, fiction and nonfiction. And, some of the best films being made today. And I think it's a thrilling that Kanopy is making them all so available to so many people.
Yeah, as obvious and overt as the Best Picture winner Moonlight, which is available on Kanopy,
sure,
all the way down to films, like you said, that you just maybe didn't have access to 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Kanopy's got you covered here, and we've got you covered here on the Film Library because we're going to have the opportunity to talk to an expert. Now, I wish I could just interview you on this for a solid hour, and maybe we'll get to that one day, but not this week.
I am perfectly thrilled to have to hand that responsibility over to our guest today, the wonderful Cheryl Dunye. She is the first Black lesbian to direct a feature film, Watermelon Woman, available here on Kanopy, but her career has gone on into very fascinating directions. She continues to make feature films. She has become an acclaimed director of television as well on many of your favorite shows, including Bridgerton and Queen Sugar and Dear White People. She also directed an episode of the nonfiction miniseries Pride, where she talked about legendary lesbian artists like Audre Lorde and Barbara Hammer and their importance in the ongoing fight for LGBTQ plus civil rights. She is a film historian. She is a filmmaker. She is a fascinating interview, and I'm so thrilled we're going to have her on the show.
Can't wait. Check it out. Here's the Film Library trivia question for today. This 2019 French historical romantic drama, written and directed by Céline Sciamma, is a heart-wrenching story about a forbidden love affair between two women. Think you know the answer? Find out after the interview. Welcome back to the Film Library Kanopy podcast. Very excited about our guest today, Alonso.
Oh, yeah. This is a filmmaker who is a groundbreaker in so many ways, part of a really important movement in queer cinema that emerged in the 90s in the United States, and a filmmaker that I aspire to look as good in Suits as she does, because it is a constant thing in my life that I will never have the silhouette of Cheryl Dunye in
You're working out some personal stuff here, huh?
Yeah, look, we go to festivals and I'm like, why did I bother? I'm going to put on a moo and go home. Cheryl Dunye is here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Hey, everybody. How you doing? So happy to be here. I love Kanopy. I tell everybody about it all the time.
All you need is a library card. It's that simple.
It's a library card. I was visiting Samuel Delaney, and I know everybody knows him as the Black sci-fi writer. And he was like, what are you watching? I said, well, I'm using my Kanopy card. He said, Kanopy? And he just writes it down, and he didn't know. So I tell everybody I see, use their Kanopy.
Excellent. Get your library card, watch Kanopy, and read Samuel Delaney while you're at it.
Right? That's exactly right.
So, Cheryl, your breakthrough feature, Watermelon Woman, is currently featured on Kanopy. And, this is a movie that was recently added to the Library of Congress, a list of significant American films. Recently had a full restoration that premiered at the Berlin Film Festival. So it is clearly a movie that is going on to continues to inspire filmgoers and to have a very fervent audience. Take us back to when the film was made. You had some shorts under your belt. You've done about 6 or 7 of those, and you were in this moment where you're drawing from the new queer cinema, but I think, in a way, obviously, you're also drawing from Clerks. So, there's a lot of 90s stuff that's happening for this film getting made.
Yeah, I think that's great that you honed in on, that being a time of new queer cinema. I was living in New York. I was a curator at the new museum. Had just been a couple Whitney biennials with my shorts. And, just feeling the need and seeing the invisibility at these New York lesbian and gay film festivals, that there was no narrative of color work in feature length. I had been doing a lot of shorts, and we all met up in those rooms and became friends, but nobody had made the feature. There were some gay men who had made it. I would say that Marlon Riggs or Isaac Julian, but nobody had done the Black lesbian feature. So that's more of my inspiration there. Woody Allen. This pure cinema. I was, a student of cinema. Graduated from Temple University, and just knew my films, knew a lot of films, watched tons of films. So I really wanted to play with that form, and I really wanted to find something that really defined who I was as a Black lesbian. So I started to search. I started to search throughout cinema history, looking for famous Black lesbians anywhere. And it dawned on me that in the Black cinema timeline, there was no mention of any queer people, like outright lesbians, at least. There were a couple queer Black actors in the 50s and the like, and a few other characters who were in other fields of entertainment. But there was nothing there. And then when I read Vito Russo's Celluloid Closet, there was no mention of anybody of color or a Black lesbian. There's some folks of color, of course, but nobody was a Black lesbian. So I was like, I'll just make it up. And thus, The Watermelon Woman started. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it is so much a movie that is, definitely of its moment in terms of being, unapologetically queer, but it is also so much a movie of somebody who loves movies. And, your character works in a video store, is researching, old Hollywood. So there's a cinephilia that's really kind of baked into the movie from the get-go.
Exactly. So it really addressed all my parts. My cinema part, my love for being a Black lesbian, and then also a love for my community. This is a project that I really wanted to use my own community for talent. Mm-hmm. There's Toshi Reagan, there's Brian Freeman from Promo for Homos, there's Sarah Schulman, right. There's controversial Camille Paglia. There's so many elements of this that were about me, my world, and that's what filmmakers do. The best projects come from people who know how to turn their worlds into those bigger stories, and that's really what I did.
It's a film that does feel very 90s, but also feels universal because of the emphasis on the stories that we tell, right? So the stories that are told and oral tradition that's passed along. And there's such an emphasis on, finding these stories that were lost in the ether, and knowing that you're kind of hopefully making history while you're making the film. What did you feel that onus or responsibility, or were you just excited to add a chapter to the stories that we will hopefully tell over the next, generations to come?
It was very complicated. I mean, that's a complicated and stacked question, but I must say that I was looking for my break into feature film making, as a director, as somebody who wanted to do that as well as do my next sort of art project. Because I was, came from this MFA in visual arts. I was a video artist. So I was looking for something that really sort of spoke to all my, mushrooming out and growing. And so I was looking for something that could show in any of those arenas. That's the collaboration with Zoe Leonard, another artist, for the photography that's in it. So that's a project on its own, and just really trying to make something that would empower people, musically, trying to keep, folks in there, trying to deal with that as a cast, really trying to make this a project about, queer folks making queer film, a queer director, or Black lesbian director, saying that authorship, and then hoping that it would open the door for other Black lesbians to do so. And unfortunately, we don't see another Black lesbian feature until 11 years later with Dee Reese.
Wow.
And, Pariah. And so, it's very upsetting to see that the gatekeepers did not, run at me to, make the next big indie hit. Barely did we get a distributor at that time. And, I was not embraced the way that's the other, queer white directors were. I think, Todd Haynes exploded at this point. There were other folks who, really exploded on that indie Sundance world. It wasn't even Sundance, what I'm saying? So it was definitely this film that reads, you were in Sundance. I was not Sundance with this, it was in Berlin, which tells you about the world that I really am trying to deal with. I'm trying to deal with the world and not just Sundance, So it's a project that does, connect with a global identity and thus liberating folks who see the film to have their own identity and tell their own stories.
Sure. So much of the film is steeped in the idea of film history and accessibility and archiving. And I'm wondering if, because of all of that, given the fact, like I said, the film recently did have this restoration, and it's now available, not just on Kanopy, but the Criterion Collection put out a really lovely Blu-ray. Did you always have in mind that the preservation of the Watermelon Woman was going to be an important part of the film's afterlife, given that so much of the Watermelon Woman is about that very thing?
I'm a big fan of the archive, obviously, and so I know and knew the importance of folks archiving themselves, telling their stories, using their photos, using their lives. And, we have so few, viable archives or archives of sort of Black queer life that I knew that this would, address that. There's several docs that are out there. Michelle Parkinson was somebody who was a professor of mine, and she made the Audre Lorde project as well as other projects. Again, we could talk about Marlon making sort of a new form that he was doing. He passed, though, shortly before my film. So I knew that, yes, once you put yourself out there, there's no way that folks could deny you exist, and thus, spoke Zarathustra.
Since the release of the film, what are some of the films that you've seen along the way over the last 25, 30 years that have really been inspiring to you, or something that you think has really been pretty monumental, or that you've enjoyed?
Wow, that's a big, it's 30 years almost now of cinema. I mean, again, I love genre, and I guess you can see that in what I do now as an episodic director. So, one of my favorite genre films that I watch regularly is The Fifth Element.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to say that's very fun. It's a project that does sew up a lot of, different people and things, and builds a world that, I'd love to live in. Right? So many people want to live in that world. So that's a fun one that I love to go to often. I would say I love watching Sally Powder's work. People who are playing, The Hours, people who are playing with form, talking about lives lived. Adaptation was another good one. People who are trying to, mess things up a bit in how they, reveal their worlds and their storytelling. So I really look towards folks who do that. Or people who make a real authentic world, a world that wow, I just want to be in that world. I could only talk right now about an episodic I just burned through was The Bear.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Which is a world that I just want to live in.
Yeah.
I want to be with those folks, and I feel that way.
That's right.
Or another film that I felt like is a very close homage, and I loved it, which also has one of the stars from The Bear, Bottoms. Which is another okay, all right, let's talk, let's talk, Bottoms team, let's talk, So I'm happy that I did. I'm happy that the Bottoms folks had me to stand on,
Sure.
in that sense of having a Black lesbian lead in comedy. I'm all over the place with what my loves are. I just love to watch.
So much of your features are great. Your TV work has been terrific. One of my favorite things you've done in recent years was the Pride miniseries, where they sort of went by decade and looked at the history of the LGBTQ plus civil rights movement, and they gave you the 70s, and you focused very much on Barbara Hammer and Audre Lorde, and it was a bold step, because I think for a lot of people the temptation is, we have to talk about Harvey Milk or Studio 54 or whatever, but you used those two artists as a way to really reflect everything that was going on, and it was so all encompassing. I just really admired how you kind of took the part and brought us to the whole in talking about such a sweeping topic.
Yes, I would say Pride was an amazing project. I got to collaborate with somebody from New Court Cinema, Christine Vachon,
right.
who I had not collaborated with. And she just said, which one do you want? And I said, the 70s. It's an archive that's unexplored.
Yeah.
I don't think people from the 70s who lived then appreciate their lives. We're losing them more and more. So if you have a queer elder who lived through the 70s and has a great story to tell, please help them archive it, tell their story.
Sure.
And Barbara was really significant because as an undergrad, I think Barbara came to Temple, or I met her maybe in graduate school. Barbara came and spoke and literally, picked me up and embraced me, and hand in hand, me and Barbara became really tight. And that work really is something that, strong, and our friendship was strong. And Audre is Audre. I mean, I wouldn't exist without Audre. And, Audre's work is something that's very close and personal to me. I'm working on something about Audre's life right now, and with Christine Vachon too. So it's amazing that it comes full circle if you believe in who you are, know who you are, and kind of try to create a cinema. And that's what I'm trying to do, is really create a cinema out there with my feature work that really kind of holds together.
Going back to the idea of trajectories that filmmakers have out of Sundance, and I find it vexing that for decades now you have a lot of times men, particularly white straight men will have a hit at Sundance and they'll get handed the keys to some studio franchise. And then when women have successful, indie projects, it's like HBO has something for you, we hope, and so I think, you've continued to do really great work, but part of me does wonder, like, what are the movies that you might have made all this time, if the industry weren't the industry?
Right. I mean, I think you only can tell stories because you fail or because you lived a rich life, and those are, or you have a beef or something like that. And I have all those things. So it's my having become content with, and I think the Watermelon Woman, says it all, of making my own Hollywood, of making my own, world, especially the world of the Watermelon Woman, where, for 10, 20 years, I traveled the Chitlin circuit everywhere I can go around the world, every university. I was my own, theatrical, distribution at that point to keep it alive. But there's definitely a world that was there that I made, and people who, far and wide, supported the film. So it's something to that's where I find solace, is that, I'm the sort of ambassador and the storyteller that, people want more. And I think that's the most important thing right now. And that's encouraging, is like, I can make more, the indie folks are now, embraced differently in this world of, as we come out of all these strikes, in particular, old systems always, have, their run, and people go back to looking for new things. So people are looking for, ways to do things, differently, or, oh, Cheryl did that, let's call her up, and so I get a lot of that. And I'm like, I know how to do it practical, and we can save XYZ on the, but, whatever. So it, they want that old wisdom sometimes and then this, conversation I can have with some younger directors, but I don't feel that, like, I mean, the same way everybody feels about, like, so and so making, $1 million, $1 million film, sure, and blah 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 blah, that sort of thing. I had that idea, The ideas are global and out there. It's just how you snatch it and put it together. So, and who can make it, fresh and first, and finding the right place for it too, because it might be better in the art world. What about an installation? Or maybe it's a doc. Sure. And, maybe it needs to be something that's small. So you really have to figure out what's best suited for your project, and make, or your Hollywood, and just make it, make your own Hollywood.
As somebody who was part of the new queer cinema generation of the 90s, we're now seeing a new generation that has basically never known a world where The Watermelon Woman didn't exist, where, My Own Private Idaho didn't exist, or Go Fish, or all of these films that have been so influential over the years. And if you're trying to explain why the new queer cinema mattered to people, like, do you have an anecdote or just sort of an illustration of something of, like, this never existed before and now it exists as a matter of course?
Right. I mean, I think new queer cinema, I think The Watermelon Woman in particular, brings, what we know as the margins or the invisible to the center. At this moment, you can click on, you could have a whole Black lesbian cinema night, at your house, and watch features and films on demand, through Kanopy and, a variety of other streaming sources. But Kanopy's great because you get the Audre Lorde Project on Kanopy. By Michelle Parkinson and Ada Griffin, who were at Third World Newsreel at the beginning of my career. You can create your own, theater. Right, curated. You get a projector, you get your whatever, popcorn, your little group of friends, and you have your, streaming party or whatever you want. But you can, very much be specific. And I'm glad that I was able to fill that void. And I'm glad that there are more selections, so you can craft how you want to watch, but there's still more stories to tell. Yeah. And I must say that to encourage young folks. I mean, The Watermelon Woman is one story, but hopefully it allows you to tell your own story.
What's your idea of a good night of watching movies? Like, what's your comfort viewing? What do you curl up on the sofa with?
Oh, comfort viewing. When I was on the road with the episodics, Forensics Files was something that
Wow.
really, like, put me down. Like, you watch it and it's like the voice of repeat and then. But I must say I'm a Poirot.
Oh, okay.
Poirot fan.
Suchet?
I love, yes. Yep. David. And I can watch those again because of the detail. Because of the detail of these things. I mean, their death on the Nile is like no other death on the Nile. You know what I'm saying? It's just, they go to complete detail, like just, and I just watch it for those glorious, reproductions. And, there's so many people who are younger in those that, appear and have careers later on. You should find out for yourself. But I can go through that catalog again and again. I mean, I think there's like 10 or 13 seasons. It's sort of like my thing with Columbo too. I used to be a Columbo person.
Oh yeah.
And I've burned through that a couple of times already. But yeah.
Yeah, that's another one that definitely rewards rewatching.
Yep. Again and again and again.
For sure. Cheryl, the Watermelon Woman has found a home on Kanopy, and Kanopy is a very curated collection, which is wonderful for cinephiles. But we're finding with a lot of streaming services, things will just disappear. They'll just leave. And so weirdly enough, we have more to watch now, but the assuredness that the things that we have from film history and us to be able to get our hands on them, it seems like it's going away. It seems like we're like cyclically moving back around to having a problem we used to have when we would all go to the video store to check out the same VHS tape, but no one can find it and we can't have it. Is there a concern for someone who clearly loves film? It's evident in The Watermelon Woman, evident just speaking to you, of this part of the cycle of having so much at our disposal, but also we're kind of at the mercies of these streamers to make sure that we have this. If we don't own a copy of The Watermelon Woman on VHS or DVD, or another movie that's historically very, very valuable and important, is there a concern that the more we have, maybe the less we have?
So thank you for that question. I'll use the case of my second feature film, Stranger Inside, which HBO, I did with HBO, Jim McKay, Michael Stipe, Yolanda Ross's big film that she's now on The Chi and a variety of other things. That project was the first one up on the HBO's independent cinema that they were doing in the early 2000s. And for some reason, they, after they finished that run with all the directors, Patricia Razimas, there's a few other folks in that space, they just shut us down. You can't get, they won't let anybody see that work. It's in their, it was a 35 millimeter, it's sitting in their vault. You can't find it anywhere, right? But every once in a while on YouTube or somewhere out there, there were moments where I was like, don't shut it down. This is the only way people are going to see it. So, you could find on the Internet Archive or some, strange, odd way, people will find what they need to see. They'll build it together with clips. They'll tell stories. They'll make images. They'll, do something with it. But I feel confident that, especially with Kanopy and other sources like Mubi or Criterion 2, I'm good. I was like, let me cancel everything else. I'm really good with that because I can. It's so funny. My wife goes, "Oh, let's watch something from Kanopy," and I go, "Oh, go look at my my list of saved things and my watch list." And she was like, "Huh?" Because I had just saved everything good, and marked just stuff that was deep. I go deep into it, and she was like, "Oh my." Let's go. We have a whole cinema class here to do and talk about genres and talk about styles and black and white films from the 30s and just everything. It's amazing that that resource is there. And for those VHSs that were brought to Kanopy and made streaming, but that were in the library or something like that, that's the only place you can find them. There's a thing about Father Divine, a documentary on there. I think that's there. Or there's something with about black theater actors Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee. That documentary is on Kanopy that you can't find anywhere else. So I'm happy. Like, again, I'm good. I mean, everything else is a little expensive. Kanopy is free, and I'm just, I'm Kanopy.
I love it.
Awesome. I'm a Kanopy. But, yeah. So tell me about Kanopy. If I have 2 library cards, do I get 20?
That's a great question. That's above my pay grade. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, I think maybe you and your wife could maybe swing each having your own account, but don't, we'll have to kick that one upstairs. I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah, because I have San Francisco, I have Oakland, and I have Berkeley Public Library. I mean, it's only registered in one, obviously. But, I can have different.
Well, it'll be our little secret.
Listen, go for it. Cheryl Dunye, thank you so much for your time, your contribution to cinema, continuing forward. We really appreciate you sharing your insight with us and taking just the time to chat with us. We really appreciate it.
All
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye.
It's time to find out the answer to today's Film Library Trivia question. If you guessed the 2019 movie Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you were correct. Welcome back to the Film Library Kanopy podcast. What a fun time we had with Cheryl Dunye, talking about The Watermelon Woman, talking about LGBTQ plus cinema, and hopefully its bright future ahead of us, Alonso.
It just keeps going. And, the era that we talked about, the new queer cinema, definitely still remains very influential, opened a lot of doors. And it's exciting to see a whole new generation coming along that's kind of getting to build off of what was created there.
So can I do something a little
by
different?
All means.
Obviously there's a ton of titles in this genre on Kanopy. They've got Moonlight. I've seen Moonlight. I love Moonlight. You educate me as we dive deeper into some of the titles that, growing up in South Carolina, being a millennial, weren't really at my disposal that I need to seek out and watch. Hit me with some classics.
Well, I'll tell you, another one that I'll be talking about is a film that I know you've seen, and that's Lizzie Borden's Born in Flames.
I have seen Born in Flames.
Yes.
That's accurate.
Which I think is very much a precursor to The Watermelon Woman, in that it is very much a low-budget lesbian film with a lot of characters of color, and deals with the media. In this case, more it's about pirate radio and kind of a dysfunctional, future America. But absolutely a key film in this space. The new queer cinema, which we talked about, that Cheryl was part of. One of the big films from that wave is Gregor Rocky's The Living End, which is a road movie about 2 HIV positive guys who were sort of at their own wits' end, basically, and sort of trying to figure out what's going to be next for them. It is in the school of the Jean-Luc Godard, they got a gun and they got a car and, they're really hot and we're going to see what happens.
Never a bad plot for a movie.
Always works.
That's right.
Derek Jarman, another influential filmmaker in the lead up. And he kind of gets lumped into the new queer cinema because when that term was born, when our friend B. Ruby Rich had a panel at Sundance in 1991, Jarman was there that year with the film Edward II, which is on Kanopy. They've also got his movie Caravaggio, which is a biopic of the artist. And it is, if you know Caravaggio's paintings and the chiaroscuro, the shadows, the way that he uses color and light, Jarman shoots the film to look like a Caravaggio painting throughout.
Wow.
So it's really gorgeous. And
sounds fascinating.
Commenting upon itself, features, as always, his muse Tilda Swinton. It's a really great movie if y'all haven't checked it out. And then as far as, I think Cheryl talking about the filmmakers that she opened the door for, one of those directors would be Elegance Bratton, who was a black filmmaker who also comes out of the world of documentary, made his debut very recently with a really powerful film, The Inspection. It's an autobiographical film about his experience being in the Marines during the Gulf War period, where Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in play.
Is it a doc?
No, it's a narrative.
Okay.
But it's a period narrative, and it's very much draws upon his own life. And it's a very powerful film and really beautifully well done, an extraordinary narrative debut, and it's really exciting that people can see it here on Kanopy. It is part of their very vast collection. And if you're looking for something lighter, Don Roos's The Opposite of Sex with Lisa Kudrow and Christina Ricci. It's a very funny movie. Some really sharp dialogue. Some of my favorite. One of my most quotable movies. Oh, Lyle Lovett's in it too.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, wow. it's a lot of fun. So a really vast array. You know, let your fingers, your carrot, your whatever it is on your device do the walking through the LGBTQ plus section at Cameo at Kanopy. You're going to find a lot of amazing work and films that were influential in the past, films that are influential now, and kind of follow the history of a community that has not always gotten to express itself on the big screen, but has always had artists working in the industry, has always sort of found ways to, whether in the like experimental art house space or even going into more commercial areas, like Best Picture winner Moonlight, which is on there. There's all kinds of choices.
And the beauty of Kanopy is you watch one of these, they're going to give you a bunch of great suggestions along with Alonso's here. Those films are going to vary by title and country and library, depending on where you are, obviously. But you're going to find something great. You can follow Kanopy at Kanopy on the socials. Go to kanopy.com. So many ways to get involved. Reminder, this is no subs, no ads. Just a library card, guys. There's so many titles at your disposal. Become educated, become entertained. All of these things are there and more at Kanopy, and I can't wait to discover even more on another episode with you.
Absolutely. We're so glad you joined us for this one. We hope you'll come back for next time. Until then, go watch something.